Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Frank Alioto, Frank the Tank. I met Frank years ago at the very beginning of the CalRock days when Frank was working for Edelbrock. But we are going to talk to Frank like we always do with everybody about basic history. And so, Frank, I want to say first off, thank you very much for coming on and consenting for an interview.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I have enough to say that interests everybody out there.
I'm sure you do. You have some life experiences that are definitely different than some of us. And, I think that it's a good basis for everybody to understand what everybody else is like in this industry. So thank you again. Let's get started right away. And, where were you born and raised?
I was born in San Francisco, California. I lived there for 2 or 3 weeks until my parents went away to grad school at the University of California, Davis. So I spent my first few years there, and then we moved to Fresno, and I stayed there through high school.
Fresno, okay. Fresno was probably a lot better place back in those days than I would imagine it is now.
I have not been back in probably 8 or 10 years, so I don't know. I don't get up that way very often, and when I do, I'm trucking through to go to the mountains somewhere.
I understand that. So let's talk about those. Probably remember more about the Fresno years than the years before that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those Fresno years. What were your family's interests, and what kind of life did you live growing up?
I think it was fairly normal. I grew up mostly with my mom. My parents were divorced by the time I was in Fresno. She took me camping. She would take me up to Yosemite because it was close to the house. And she would, my favorite hobby was playing with bicycles and BMX bikes. And my mother was not mechanical at all, so she'd get me tools, get me a bicycle. I would break it, and we would have to figure out how to fix it. Somehow, my grandparents were very mechanical. It skipped a generation, and I'm very mechanical, which has been helpful.
Absolutely.
But I loved that getting out in the outdoors, and I loved, riding my bike, feeling the wind for years. And when I was young, I fell in love with off-road magazines and any magazines that involved cars. I was just so addicted to vehicles. When I got my first couple cars, I had a Camaro, I had a Nissan, I had a Firebird. And my friends and I would autocross, and we would drive probably too fast to be considered safe on the streets. And at one point, I went up to Shaver Lake with a friend in, I think it was an 87 or 88 Toyota pickup, IFS bone stock. We went 2 miles an hour all day, and I had the best time of my life. And I was like, I have to start four-wheeling, because if I wad up my Camaro, I'm going to get hurt. But if I fall over in a truck, the truck's going to get hurt, and there's a good chance I'm just going to get up and get away.
Right.
So I kind of transitioned from fast cars into trucks at that point. Of course, by then I was in college, and I didn't have any money whatsoever. So for graduation, I got my first four-wheel drive, a 98 Jeep Wrangler. First car I'd ever bought new. Loved the thing. I ended up getting a job in Sutter Creek up near Jackson, California. So I joined a four-wheel drive club, and I just went all over the, what do they call it? All over the foothills four-wheeling.
Right.
Rubicon, Barrett Lake, Doozy. I can't remember the name of the one in Sonora. But anywhere I could go, I would go. And I loved it to death. I went every weekend, all summer long. And then in the winter, I skied all winter. It was just a great time.
So you basically, Sutter Creek, that's real close to where my stomping grounds were, and that's Placerville.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of the same shared experiences. Mine were a few years before that. I got started in like 82 that I started wheeling. And I too fell in love with it. I just wish I'd have done it a little sooner in life, like right out of high school. But, it's okay. We get to things when we get to them. So those early days in school, you're riding your bikes. You're getting into high school. Were you athletics? Were you into scholastic, or kind of your own thing?
I was mostly into my own thing. I was on the track team as a shot putter. If I remember correctly, the ball barely cleared the circle that you're supposed to spin in. I was not the greatest athlete in the world. I liked to ride my mountain bike, my BMX bikes, get out and like see the world. I was moderately good at scholastics. Some of my friends from high school liked to point out that I never studied, I never did homework, and I did better than they did on the tests. So somewhere, somehow I was paying attention, but I was not the nose to the grindstone, let's see how good we can be.
Right. That's how I was. I'm a really good test taker. Not so good of a sit there in class type of kid myself.
Yeah. It worked out well for me. I mean, I was able to get into, I also went to the University of California at Davis, and I studied mechanical engineering there. So I did well enough to get into school. And after the first year of college, where you're not really sure what's going on and you're taking lots of prerequisite classes, when I started to get into the core mechanical engineering classes, they were some of the most interesting classes I took in college, because I've always wanted to know how things work and why things work. And that was really enjoyable to me. I worked on a research team that built a hybrid electric vehicles for some academic competition sponsored by the Department of Energy. But it was fun to play with electric cars before anybody knew what they were, and hybrids. And I did burnouts on Woodward in Detroit in a Taurus with a Honda motor and a big electric motor.
Really?
Yeah, we were there for some big parade celebrating the 100th anniversary of the automobile.
Okay.
And somehow I ended up driving, And it was really an interesting parade because there were all kinds of vehicles. And we were next to a Mustang Notch drag car. And the guy would go a couple hundred feet, do a burnout, go a couple hundred feet, do a burnout. So here we are in a front-wheel drive Taurus. I put on the e-brake and I did a burnout. With the torque of the electric motor plus the little gasoline engine, it spun the tires pretty good. It was rather hilarious.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk some more about that time there with your mechanical engineering, and what was your plan when you were going through school at that point? What was your long-term goal with the mechanical engineering?
You know, honestly, I did not have a long-term goal at that time. I had no idea when I was in high school what I wanted to be when I grew up. I loved architecture. My grades were not good enough to get into a school of architecture, but they were good enough to get into Davis as a civil engineering student, and somebody told me they built structures. So I found that fascinating, and I started along the path of civil engineering. And then I learned I would be building culverts and bridges and roads, and that didn't really fascinate me. So as I said earlier, I had fast cars, and I used to autocross.
Okay.
And I was at an autocross, and the local college had all their engineering students out with a Formula SAE car. And they built this car, and it was kind of a neat little thing, but not one of them could drive at all. And the car wasn't so technologically advanced that I didn't understand it. And I kind of watched these guys driving and racing, and I was like, you know, if these guys can do that, I can do so much more than them. So that's when I went into mechanical engineering. I just realized that if I wanted to play with cars, it was a good way to do it.
Yes, and hopefully get paid to do it. Correct.
Yes, hopefully get paid to do it. I did not have a long-term plan. I didn't know what was going to happen after I graduated. Some people I knew had gone on to Ford and GM. I didn't know if that was for me. And then because of the hybrid research group I was in, I was working with a PhD candidate, and he got a phone call from a small shock company in Sutter Creek that was looking for an engineer, and he felt it wasn't up his alley, but it might be up my alley. So I went and interviewed, and my first job out of college was, again, working on cars and designing shock absorbers in Sutter Creek.
And what was the name of that company?
That company was called Rycor Racing and Development.
Okay.
They designed a shock absorber that was then licensed to Edelbrock.
Ah, there's the tie-in. Okay.
So I worked in Sutter Creek for about 2 or 3 years with the people from Edelbrock, with the engineers from Edelbrock, and we did a lot of interesting things. And then Rycor closed down its doors, and the gentleman at Edelbrock offered me an opportunity to move down south. And I was like, well, they're a pretty well-known automotive company. I should take this opportunity and see where it goes. I didn't know if it was going to last a year, if it was going to last 5 years. I wasn't sure how I was going to like living in Los Angeles after living in the foothills.
What time frame was that?
I moved to LA in November of 1999.
Okay.
I had spent about 2.5 years in Sutter Creek, and then I moved down here, and going from Sutter Creek to Los Angeles is absolutely culture shock.
Yes.
And there were so many more social outlets for me in LA than in Sutter Creek, where I was one of the 5 people in their 20s that was not either married or had moved away. There wasn't a lot of social outlets up there.
True.
So I moved to the beach and had a wonderful time down here.
And what community was that?
I lived in Hermosa Beach for years.
Okay.
I lived about 3 houses from the sand, about 3 blocks from all the bars. And for my late 20s, early 30s, that's where I was. And I absolutely loved it. I would come up to the Rubicon or Doozy, usually on 3-day weekends or anytime I could get away. I was still into 4-wheeling. I went to the Hammers often, Big Bear, anywhere I could get into the dirt with the Jeep, I did. And having a lifted Jeep was not an ideal vehicle for commuting in LA. It got terrible gas mileage, and early on, some of the link arms from all my use in Northern California, some of the link arms would just fall off driving down the 405.
Well, that's inconvenient.
Yeah, I lost both upper links like at various different times and had to weld the bracketry back on. The 405 is at least as tough on vehicles as the Rubicon. There, I said it. I will not take it back.
It's had more frustrating.
I've had way more breakdowns on the 405 than I ever had on the trail.
That says something for sure. So then, with working for that shock company and then going to work for Edelbrock, did you continue working on just suspension or shocks, or did you get into other parts of automotive design?
I did a lot with shock absorbers at Edelbrock. I moved up through the shock division fairly quickly. I did a little bit of assisting with some of the suspension parts, but I didn't butt in too heavily because people are very protective of their own jobs and products, and they don't usually like it if somebody new comes in and tells them they're doing it wrong. And I am famous for telling people they are doing it wrong.
True enough.
Eventually, Edelbrock bought a company called Russell Performance that did braided stainless lines.
Right.
And they moved it into the shock building. And so now I was presiding over design for both the shock absorber division and Russell Performance. And I had engineers working under me at that point, but I was the chief engineer for both divisions and had to make sure that everything was running smoothly.
That sounds like a pretty good job.
It was a great job. I loved it to death. I don't know. I was saddened when I could not do it anymore.
Right. And was that, we'll get into the accident if you don't mind, but not right at the moment. Was that because of the accident?
Yes, I could not go to an office for a time and work a regular job. It just wasn't something I could do at the time.
Right. Physically being able to do that. Correct. Okay.
Correct.
So then those early years there at either Edelbrock or before, you continued to wheel as well?
I wheeled as often as I could. I would go on at least 3 or 4 big wheeling trips a year. And Edelbrock had a lot of car enthusiasts at the company, but not many of them were off-road enthusiasts. So I started getting sent to the off-road events. I worked quite a few Sierra Treks, Jeepers Jamboree, Moab Easter Jeep Safari, Tierra del Sol. I got to go to a lot of those events. And although I think I had to work more at the booth than I really wanted to, I still got to go. I still got to get some playing on company time. And I really enjoyed that. But, I would have always preferred to have way more time in the dirt than I was able to get into the dirt.
So when you were in Sutter, you said you were wheeling with a club. What was the name of that club?
The Mother Lode Rock Crawlers.
Okay.
Del Albright was a member also, and he and I used to go on club runs together, and he was always talking about land use. So from the very beginning, I was very aware of how precarious four-wheeling could be and how easily it was for them to close trails.
Right. And did you work on land use issues as well on your spare time?
Not much. I was always aware and always tried to make sure I didn't do anything foolish or people that I went with. But I was not really as active as Dell. But it was kind of interesting for my first four-wheeling club to have him in it.
Right. And who else did you wheel with back in those days?
I had a couple friends that I met through the club, and we would just go on runs by ourselves. One of them was a gentleman named David Gaby, who had a bright red Land Cruiser, and there was another guy named Keith who had a bright yellow Land Cruiser that somebody in Tahoe City has now. I've seen it around. And we would just go wheeling as often as we could.
Okay.
Nobody who was big in the industry, just people that, built their trucks in their driveways, and we would just go wheeling as often as we could.
And when did you meet some of the guys like Schlossberg and some of the others that are in the industry?
So Schlossberg was really kind of interesting. My friend Dave, with the Land Cruiser, he was on a website called Pirate 4x4. I didn't know what it was.
Never heard of her.
Yeah. He kept sending me links to all these crazy things that had been done to TJs. And one of them was Dave Schlossberg and Drew Burrows put a coilover on the front of a TJ with a long arm. So they were located in San Luis Obispo, and a lot of my friends from college are in that area in the Central Coast. So one time when I was up visiting my college friend, he was also into Jeeps. We decided to drive down to Poly Performance back when it was on Tank Farm Road and just see what they were all about. Now we get there, and it's I guess you could call it like a one-car garage in an industrial building. And there were a bunch of guys in there. Dave was there, Drew was there, our friend Wes was there, and they were building Dave's old Toyota Truggy. And we got to talking about shocks and suspension. And shortly thereafter, I ended up doing business with both Dave and the company Drew was with, Full Traction, at the time.
Okay.
They both became customers of our private label shocks, and we began to have just a good business relationship at first. And I was on the phone with them all the time. I was visiting them. Sometimes because I would go to where they lived, I would deliver product. Drew helped me build my epic CJ7 that I built bright red for use in Edelbrock advertising. It was a good time. And again, we would just go wheeling as often as we could. We'd see each other at all the company events, all the big events. We would just hang out, drink beer, and talk around the campfire.
So that's interesting that you got to see Poly Performance when it was just basically a one-car shop.
Yeah, and only because I just walked in there, and that particular weekend, all those people that worked in the industry happened to be there helping Dave with a project.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And we became fast friends, and Drew went to JV a lot, and he would always invite me. My TJ would go to JV and break down, and he would help me scab it together to get back to LA for work. And it was a good time.
That's pretty cool. Do you remember the first competition that you went to?
That was when I was at, when I still lived in Northern California. We came down to watch a competition. I was talking about it today with somebody. It was an ARCA competition on the north side of the lake bed, kind of way far in. And the first thing I saw when I got there was, I forgot his name, but Blaine Johnson and another gentleman was driving, and they flopped a brand new TJ that was just beautiful and ripped the entire driver's side of the tub just down and backwards. And I had not been at the event for 10 seconds, and I watched this and I was like, this could get expensive.
Yeah, that was up at the master's course then.
Yeah, it was up. You had to drive through the lake bed, up around, across the other lake bed, past like Clawhammer.
Yep.
And kind of up by the mine. I don't remember what, the area is called anymore.
Yeah, that's the master's course. Yep.
That was tons of fun to watch. And that was the first one I watched.
Okay, cool. So that was probably 2000.
I would have thought 99. It might have been after I moved to LA.
Yeah.
But I thought it was when I was still in Northern California, but it might have been when I moved to LA.
99 would have been about right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then you went to work. So it was after that you went to work for Edelbrock, and then started going to Terra del Sol and all the runs, the enthusiast runs, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yes.
And when you're working the booths there, you got a chance to do a little bit of wheeling occasionally, I guess, because you're working the booth, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody that's in the industry knows what that's like, going to Moab or wherever. What was out of all those places, what was your favorite place to go?
I really love Moab. It's just so enormous. I used to hot lap from across Golden Spike. I would go, Poison Spider Mesa across Golden Spike and out the other side. I would turn around and go right back. I just loved those trails up in there.
Nice.
I was never a big fan of Moab Rim, because I'm sure it's perfectly safe, but the cliffs make you think it's not. It's like, if I tumble here, how far am I going to roll?
Could be quite a ways.
Yeah, I don't want that. And then when I first went on Moab Rim with Dave, he flopped like 5 times in his Toyota pickup. And I was like, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah, he got close to the edge. Didn't he flop on like not Golden Crack, but Devil's Crack or whatever they call it?
I don't know. He flopped everywhere in that thing.
We'll have to get him on and regale us with his many flops there.
I have a lot of pictures of Dave and his sleepy Toyota. I remember the day that we were on Moab Rim with him, the first time I went wheeling with him. I had Fred behind me in his Ultimate Avalanche, and Dave was in front of me in his Toyota. We went up to the top, had lunch. We're coming back down. Dave's behind me, and I look in my mirror, and he's fine. I look in my mirror, not 1 second later, he's laying on his side. We come down a ways further, and he flops it again. It was like, this guy's, I did not know what to expect. And he put that poor truck on its lid so many times.
Did Fred ever roll in your when you were with him?
No, I've never seen Fred. I've seen pictures of Fred flopped. Actually, I take it all back. One of, let me think here, probably in 2006 or 7, Fred had a company car that was a 200 series Land Cruiser. And he and I were in Hungry Valley. So Fred and I were in Hungry Valley, and he was shooting a feature on Jason Payne's pickup truck that was finished after Jason passed away. And after Fred shot the feature, he and I went four-wheeling, and I was in my TJ and he was in this beautiful brand new Toyota 200 series Land Cruiser that belonged to Toyota. And again, I should just never blink when I'm on the trail because I'm following Fred. I blink and he's laying on his side in a ditch. He had gone up over a hill and just flopped right in the, I don't know how he did it. He just fell into a hole. The road turned and he didn't. If you ever go on my Instagram, I posted it a couple weeks ago, a picture of that accident.
And what's your Instagram account name?
It's at Frank the Tank with 3 T's for the. So
Okay.
it's Frank TTT the Tank.
Cool. Everybody get a chance to go over there to Instagram and check that out. I'm sure you've got plenty of cool photos from back in the day with all those guys.
I posted a lot of retro photos lately because I found an old hard drive when I was swapping computers, and I found a lot of my old pictures from when we were young and foolish.
So let's talk some more about stories like that.
Okay.
Any of the anybody else that you wheeled with that that might be notable that people know the names of that you had the opportunity to watch flop or do something crazy?
I've seen so many flops. One of the neat things I got to do, well, let me start over. I used to wheel a lot with Ryan Raker and Brian Ritchie. They both had little Toyotas with exo cabs.
Okay.
I think that Ryan's truck was originally built by Bender. And then Ryan worked with me at Edelbrock, and we put coilovers on it and did a lot of other stuff with it. And we would go out to the desert often with those two trucks because they held up a lot better than my TJ in the rocks of JV, especially since my TJ was my only car.
Right.
You know, you can't destroy your car every week if you have to use it to get to work. I did, but it's not a good idea. And Ryan now has his company AccuTune, so I claim that everything he knows he learned from me about shocks, which is complete BS, but it makes me feel better about myself.
It doesn't matter. Just take the credit. Nobody needs to know.
Yeah, nobody needs to know the truth. Just know that I'm all the brains.
There you go. So with JV being a place that you guys wheeled a lot, when did you see the explosion of JV's popularity?
I would go out there and it would be absolutely dead unless there was an event. My first couple of Roxy bashes were just amazing at the amount of people that came out to that, or tin benders.
Right, the jamborees. Yep.
The tin benders jamborees were just incredible. I remember going to tin benders one time, and I was with my friend Ryan and Brian, and we took the two little Toyotas, and we took another engineer from Edelbrock, and we went out and we decided, we got there about 10 or 11 p.m. I had time to say hi to Drew, and then we went to run a night run in the Toyotas up Sledge, we figured we'd be back in 45 minutes. We broke a burr field almost immediately. So we swapped the burr field. Then the other truck lost an alternator. So we kept swapping batteries between the two trucks. So the one would charge and then we'd swap the battery. Then we broke another burr field. All the flashlights were dead. We were literally changing burr fields in the dark pretty much, or by tail light. At some point, I got fed up at about 5 in the morning, hiked up onto the big sand hill that's the exit, and fell asleep like praying for warmth. But it ended up being an all-night wheeling trip up Sledge, which is normally a 30-minute trip, round trip back to the 40 minutes back to the lake bed.
Right.
And it was an all-nighter. And I remember seeing Drew first thing in the morning, and he's like, "Hey, you coming out on the trail?" And I'm like, "I need to sleep. I need to relax. I'm done." And he looked at me and said, "You never go on a night run with a Toyota without a sleeping bag." And I thought that was the greatest quote ever.
I think that everybody that has ever wheeled JV at least more than once has spent the night on a trail out there.
Yes. And it's cold, and all of our gear was back at camp. I think we had like a 6-pack of beer, and that was it with us. You know, we weren't planning on spending the night. So,
right. You never plan to spend the night.
Yeah.
But now you prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So how many times did you get a chance to run the Rubicon?
When I lived in Sutter Creek, I ran it literally 6-7 times a summer. I've probably run it 30 times. I didn't get to run it as much when I moved to Southern California.
Right.
Just because geographically it was far, but I've run it at least 30 times in my life. It was good times.
And what's your favorite part of the Rubicon Trail?
I used to love to camp at Buck Island. No, not Buck Island. What's the one that's closed?
Spider?
Yeah, I used to love to camp at Spider Lake. And it was just a great time. You'd run the winch cable out, and then you'd roll across on a fair lead and then drop into the water. It was great. It was just a good time.
Very true. Very true. And did you ever run Fordyce?
Oh, we ran on the weekends. We weren't doing the Rubicon. We were on Fordyce or Barrett.
Okay. Barrett's the first trail that I did ever.
Oh, wow. I did, my first trail ride was on Deer Valley.
Okay.
And I was in the Ricor Company Jeep. And the first obstacle is a little climb. And I was with our shock technician at Ricor. I was in their Jeep. And the first thing I did on the first obstacle was rip a shock apart. It did not look good. The metrics were all bad.
Hopefully you guys corrected that.
We unbolted it, threw it in the trunk, but basically somebody didn't Loctite a nut.
Oh.
Luckily, he was in the car with me when I did it, so it was his problem.
So then you worked at Edelbrock for how many years till the accident?
I worked at Edelbrock from September of 99 until December of 08.
Of 08, okay. Yeah, you were there for quite a while. 9 years?
Yeah, I had no plans to leave, but, things happen.
Right. Do you mind discussing what happened?
No. I was getting married. I had a wedding in Puerto Vallarta, A lot of my friends from the industry were there. We did the wedding. Everything went beautiful. After the wedding, well, let me back up.
Okay.
So I went to Puerto Vallarta to get married. We rented out a boutique hotel. I had tons of my friends come down and stay at the hotel for a week with us. And basically, we partied all week. By the time the wedding came along, my fiance at the time and I were so tired of drinking, we didn't even drink on the wedding day. We did like our champagne toasts at the head table with water because we were just done. And we got married. We were at the reception. We had done all the dances. Everybody was just kind of hanging out by the pool. And one of the things that a lot of brides had done at this particular venue was they would dance in their wedding dresses with their bridesmaids, and there was a very shallow part of the pool, maybe like 2 inches deep. So just basically you would get your feet wet. Well, I was talking with some people and I saw all the girls were doing that, and I said, I'm going to go over there and dance with them. And I jumped into the deeper part of the pool, and I don't know if I hit a bar stool underwater, the side of the pool, the bottom of the pool. I really don't know. I have no idea. But somewhere I hit my head and I fractured my neck. I remember floating in the pool, and I remember consciously thinking, I can't get out of this water. Thankfully, there were probably 40 people around the pool at the time, and they saw what had happened, and they pulled me right out. And it was really weird. In the wedding party, I had 2 LA Fire Department paramedics. I had a nurse, and I had somebody who worked in rehab. She was a therapist at a spinal cord injury facility. So I had all those people there. Oh, and I had another nurse who was fluent in Spanish. And they managed to get me to the local clinic. It was about 10:30 at night. And a clinic in Mexico is basically a room with like 5 instruments and a gurney. They put me on IVs, and they just had a lady come in and check on me every half hour all night to see how I was doing. I was definitely in shock. I was vomiting. I was freaked out. It was not a good time. And then when sun rises, you can get an airplane to fly you back to the States. So I was flown back to San Diego. When we stopped, we actually had to land in Mexico at the border, and the military tried to shake us down for more money before they would let us go into the States in the jet. It was a medic jet.
Wow.
It was a gurney and like 3 seats in the jet. The other interesting part is when we were landing in San Diego, my pilot and co-pilot did not speak English, and you could hear my head was close enough to the cockpit because basically it was right behind the pilot's seat. And I could hear the tower on the radio telling them that they were too low, too high, too fast. And they just kind of ignored it. And the tower is yelling at these guys the whole time. They don't speak a word of English. They didn't know what was going on. But they landed, and I was transferred to the hospital. They put me into an emergency surgery, fused my neck, and I was in and out for a couple of days where I really had no idea what was going on. And then I woke up and heard the phrase quadriplegic, which I was kind of hoping it would be like, I know people who have broken their backs and necks and not damaged their spinal cord. And I thought I was going to be okay. And then I heard that word, and it was like, oh, man. It was very stressful, to put it mildly.
I can imagine. And how old were you at that point?
36.
36.
Yep.
So you've I want to say that you appear to have dealt with it fairly well on the outside. To be honest, I have no idea what you have gone through, and
It was not an easy time. When I went to rehab at Northridge Hospital because it was close to all my in-laws, my sister-in-law, and they were able to visit me on a daily basis, as opposed to if I had stayed in San Diego. I would have been alone for those 3 months right out of surgery. So I remember they sent a psychiatrist to my room every 2 days, and I had to do, consultations with her. This happened. It's not undoable. So where do we go from here? She said I had a very very no nonsense. Okay, I'm coping with it. Let's just, what do we need to do to live life from here on out? Let's not get bogged down in why did it happen and woe is me. I was more interested in how do I live life from here on.
that's good to hear.
I honestly have had my moments, especially the first couple of years. I had my moments where I broke down a little bit, but for the most part, I was pretty able to deal with it because I don't know if it's my upbringing or how I was raised, but things happen in life and it's how you deal with them that determines who you are as a person. So if something happens, I like to just deal with it and see where it's going to go.
And now you're back to jeeping. Did that just happen recently, or has it over the last couple of years you've been able to do it?
Well, it's actually about 10 years ago. Again, that pirate place that nobody had ever heard of. There was a Rubicon trip for disabled sports, and a bunch of members of Pirate were involved with the disabled sports Rubicon ride, and they invited me as a guest of their club to go on the Rubicon. And so I and a friend went up to the Rubicon, and we were put in, I was put in a Scout, and I don't know what my friend Chad rode in. And we did the Rubicon, and it was kind of funny because when they invited me, they had a ton of volunteers, and they had a rather big group. And I said, okay, I would love to come on the Rubicon with you guys, but a couple of my friends would like to come see me on the trail. Is that okay? And they said, sure. And then the day we stayed at the Dirty Dozen campground.
Right.
And when we got there, we were setting up camp, and all of a sudden about 6 or 7 vehicles showed up filled with my friends. My friend Drew was there with my friend Aaron in a Synergy vehicle. My friend Dave, the Land Cruiser guy, was there. Some of his other friends were there. I just had this huge group of extra helpers. And when we went wheeling the next day with the club, we went into Buck Island and we hung out. And I was like, every time we stopped, I had a small army come get my chair out of the back of the Scout I was in, put it together, lift me out of this thing. And it was a great time. I loved it. I had a great time. I got to see my friends. I got to be on the trail. And I had such a blast. And then that event kind of got canceled at some point.
Yeah,
Life kind of,
they were having problems with insurance.
yeah, and then life got in the way a little bit. And a couple of years ago, I decided I really wanted my own Jeep because then I could force the issue if I wanted to go four-wheeling. Because it was always hard to find somebody to carry me as a passenger, my gear, and then a friend, because at the time I wasn't even driving. So I learned to drive in a minivan on the streets, and I just decided I really wanted my own Jeep, and I kept looking at them, and I found one in Missouri, LJ, that was very clean looking, pretty much bone stock for $8,000. And I was telling my friend Fred, because he and I share Craigslist ads all day, every day. And I said, I want this Jeep. And he's like, you don't need that Jeep. And I said, but I want it. And he said, fine. I said, how do I get it here? And he said, hold on. And he hung up and he went off. And like 10 minutes later, I'm in a group chat with a guy named Greg from Missouri who is going to pick up this Jeep for me and truck it to KOH. And that's what happened. It was probably 3 years ago now. They trucked it to KOH, wouldn't take any money for gas. I gave him a bunch of beer. I just kept him drunk the whole KOH. And that's all I could do. He wouldn't take anything else. It was really, really nice of him. And I mean, his tow vehicle broke down on the way here. His or maybe it was the way home. You know, he had troubles and problems, and he never complained about it. He just, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to be fine. Actually, his name's Jeff. Did I say Greg? Anyways, he brought the Jeep out to KOH. I had my caregiver drive it home, and I drove the minivan. And we took it, had hand controls put in it, and I drove it around at Gorman a couple times. And then I wanted to be able to run the Rubicon. So I kind of formulated a plan to put 35s on it, a small lift, and I had some old TJ parts from my old TJ in the garage and see what we could do. And then I'm very blessed to have a lot of friends in the industry, and they got together and they helped me get parts to make it much more than I ever imagined it would be. And my friend Dave Schlossberg, he offered up his shop for a place for it to be built. And he had a fabricator that owed him a favor, so he put the fabricator on the Jeep. And they built more than I ever imagined this Jeep would ever become. It is a monster. It has to be more capable than I am, for sure. And I got to go drive it this last weekend for the first time since it was modified.
Nice.
It needs a little bit of tweaking before I really get to the point where I can just go terrorize things in the mountains. But it's coming along really well. And if I had to go through the list of people who had helped me with that vehicle, your podcast would be about 3 hours long.
No worries. I'm sure they're not doing it for the recognition. They did it for you.
I am just, like I said, I am blessed, and I cannot thank, if you've helped me with this vehicle at all, you know who you are, and I cannot thank you enough. It's just amazing to me. It is. I had a pretty nice TJ before I was injured, and I loved that thing, but this is so much more than it was. It is unbelievable.
I'm glad that that's the case, and that you're going to be able to to enjoy that for the years to come and get back out there and doing what us in this industry love to do.
It is absolutely, I'm so excited. The Jeep comes home around Halloween, and I cannot wait. I used to like even just driving it around LA. I'd take the top off and go up and down the beach in it. You know, I would have somebody put me in it. It has a crane that lifts me into it.
Nice.
And so one person can help me get in and out. And it used to be my caregiver. So it was much better than when we did the Rubicon and I had to have 4 guys lift me 3 feet in the air. I just attached to a crane and I pop right in with just the minimal help. And I can't wait to just take it and go get ice cream on a Sunday afternoon. And then when I get to the trails, my girlfriend lives right at the base of Big Bear. And so Big Bear trails are just so easy to get to for me.
That's a nice area too. I had not had a chance to do Big Bear until just about 2 years ago. Tire and industry run with some influencers for one of the tire companies, and had a really good time up there. Had never done it.
I went there a lot during my Hermosa years because my roommate's family had a cabin up there. So we would go up there and hang out and ski in the winter and Jeep in the summer. And it was just great fun. Loved it it's not nearly as hard as the Northern California trails, but it beats, sitting in traffic on the freeway.
Absolutely. Anything beats that.
Yeah.
Damn 405.
Well, it'll shake your vehicle right apart.
True. So what do you think is in the future for you, Frank? Do you have any grand plans?
I don't know right now. I'm working again a little bit. I work from home. I work for Alden Shock Absorbers here in Southern California. I'm doing a little bit of design work, which is what I really enjoy doing. I would like to take an extended 4-wheeling trip. Not really like Ultimate Adventure, but just go to Sand Hollow, go to Moab, stay at a hotel because it's not easy to get me in and out of a tent, although I do have a cot and everything set up for that. I'd like to see more of the world as it relates to 4-wheeling than I have in the past. Plus, I'd like to go places like Idaho and Montana. I've not spent a lot of time where I have a lot of friends living now. I'd like to just kind of tour around and see things.
Awesome. I'm sure that some of your friends will hear this and then hopefully be able to help you put something together like that.
Yeah.
And if you do that trip
Mm-hmm.
or you're planning it, let me know. I'd like to be part of that.
I will let you know.
Yeah, I'd like that.
I feel sometimes it's like I went to Sand Hollow last year, and there's a young man named Rich that lives there who wanted to show me some trails. But schedules between his schedule and my schedule, we just couldn't meet up in the 3 days I was there.
Oh, that's too bad because he knows those trails really well.
Yeah, but I'll get back there sooner than later. I really enjoyed Sand Hollow. I thought that was just the greatest place to go 4-wheeling.
It is a great playground, that's for sure, and there's so much of it.
Yeah, I would have been lost in seconds. Luckily, we had some people in the group that were experienced and knew their way around because I had no clue where we were going. But they knew where we were going and they took us everywhere. And it was a good time.
Good. Have you been out to JV lately?
I go to KOH almost every year. I didn't go last year because I was a little bit perplexed. I wasn't terrified of the pandemic, but I just didn't really want to expose myself to it because it was still pretty early in the pandemic.
Right.
And I wasn't sure what was going on with it. And I was like, let's stay home this year.
Oh, it makes sense.
But I've gone the last several years and I hang out with the guys at Goat Belt. We have a good time and we enjoy it. Now that I have a Jeep, everybody's saying they better see it at KOH. And that means I probably have to go because if they see somebody else driving it, I'm going to get yelled at.
There you go. There you go. That's something to look forward to, at least.
Yeah. But my only problem with KOH is it's either really nice weather or freezing.
There is no in between. It's either, you're right, it's hot or it's cold.
Yeah, and
no
I don't
wind
mind.
and dust.
I don't mind the heat, but when it gets cold, I have so much nerve pain that kicks in. It's like I don't camp as much as I used to. So now it's like, okay, where's the nearest hotel? And I'll just come in and out every day.
So your LJ that they built, did they get you a good heater in it? Does it still have a factory heater?
Oh, it's still got the factory heater. It's mostly a factory vehicle.
Okay.
They replaced the drive line from the transmission back. It was in really good shape when I bought it. It's kind of high miles at 200,000, but it doesn't look like it's been abused. It's got a little surface rust. It was a pretty good deal at the time, I thought.
Excellent. So let's it was up at Dave's shop then, huh? Okay. I gotta get
It was up at Dave's shop for a long while, and then now it's at a friend's shop or a friend's house nearby while he's just doing some of he does all the tinkering on it when it's all the stuff that takes forever. The last 10% of a build takes forever, so it's at his house. He does wiring and things on it, but all the fabrication, a lot of the design was all done at Poly Performance.
Okay.
And I am grateful to Dave and all the guys at Poly Performance that helped with it.
Do you know if they took a lot of pictures along the way?
They did. I have a lot of the pictures saved in my phone.
Okay.
They're just hard to find them all. I don't mean to do it, but I probably take 10 pictures a day. And 10 pictures, and this, I've had this phone for years and it's been backed up. There are like 5,000 pictures on this phone. It takes forever to find anything.
You need to go through it sometime when you're bored and try to organize it. I tried to do that.
Put everything in folders, and that's just not the way it is right now.
I understand. Mine's the same way. Well, excellent. I would like to say thank you so much for coming on and being part of Conversations with Big Rich and sharing your story. I think that that you have a great story and that it's awesome that you were willing to share it with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm not one of those guys that likes to talk just to hear his voice, but I hope somebody finds it interesting. And it's been an enjoyable experience.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to contact you here shortly after we get off the phone because there's another little project I'd like to do about your Jeep and our magazine. So expect a text from me, and we'll see if we can make that work.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Frank, you take care, and thank you so much for being Frank the Tank.
You are welcome, and thank you as well.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.